Pride in London. My name is Asad and I'm the Director of Communications today. And we've got a fantastic episode here to talk about what it's like to be LGBT in the workplace. And if you've been living under a rock today, call right out because our Pride Matters research has just launched and we'll be talking a little bit more about that a bit later. But before we do, why don't I introduce you, or they can introduce themselves, our lovely panellists here today. So we'll start with you, Emmy.
Hi, I'm Pride in London. I am Emmy Mendoza. I work as Client Director at Carat UK. And also represent I'm Proud, which is the LGBT network for Denso ages. So I collaborate supporting the LGBT group across the different agencies that we have here in the UK.
Baines, Barclays, likewise, really pleased to be here this evening. And I'm co-chair of Spectrum, which is Barclays' LGBT network.
Hi, and I'm Garstang from NGA Human Resources, and I'm external comms lead. And we are an organisation that believes in making the workplace a better place to be.
Fantastic. So the first question that we're going to go into is, what are the hardships and difficulties that LGBT people face at work? So Sue, you were saying before, you got some ideas.
Yeah, and I think it differs. You know, it differs depending on geography, of course, and in geography I include within the UK as well as globally. But you know, the statistics speak for themselves. You know, even here in the UK, there are still problems, unfortunately. So, according to an outstanding survey, 62% of students that were out of college sadly go back into the closet when they start work.
Why do you think that is?
Clearly people feel that they're going to be judged
right.
When they start work, and some of that might be a perception, it may not be the reality, but people may perceive in joining their place of work, if they don't see visible signs of people embracing LGBT, then they may feel that they have to
go back
be
in.
Something different.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that's quite common? Like we're going into a new world of intergenerational working and millennials and Gen Z in there. Is that going to change?
I like to think that, you know, with the millennials and Generation Z being, you know, very outward thinking people, we will see a big change, but we can hope this will happen. But a lot of children are still very influenced by their parents, and there is an awful lot of fear. Why people are scared, it's perhaps because it's the unknown.
And Emmy, you were talking before that you grew up in Colombia.
Yeah.
And then you moved to the UK.
Yeah.
And you weren't out at work when you were in Colombia.
Yes, exactly.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think I definitely agree to Sue's points on background and culture, because I think, I'm coming from a country where now being LGBT is acceptable. We have legislation now, you can get married, everything is becoming a better place. But when I was living there, 10 years ago, things were different. I was still going through lots of bullying from my colleagues, which were kind of limiting my own acceptance and being able to, you know, be out of work and be myself. Yeah. So that was kind of hard, but I kind of managed it because I thought it was something that, yes, it's affecting me, but I'm proud of what I am. I'm just going to embrace myself. So even though I wasn't bringing my true self at work, I was being able to eat out with my close friends and my family.
Do you think it impacted your work though, that you weren't out?
I think it definitely does. I think it definitely does, because when you are not feeling welcoming, or when you see like the workplace is kind of putting barriers to be yourself and spread yourself, is limiting. It's like imagine that you want to run, but your shoes are so heavy that you can't really sprint. So it's sort of similar. So when I moved to the UK, was different because I was kind of restarting my life and wanting to do something different. I was like, well, I'm coming to one of the biggest cities in the world where I can definitely be myself. Nobody's going to judge me, so I'm just going to be myself. So it's been an amazing journey, and I think that despite of being in London, where everybody's so diverse, you have people from so different cultures, lots of different backgrounds, it's so welcoming, but there are still barriers in the workplace.
And so we were in London, Sue, you mentioned that actually outside of London there are difficulties, and you work for Barclays, and Barclays has branches all across the UK, and you obviously have different offices. So what is it like outside of the M25, which is probably a place that enough of us don't go to?
Yeah. And again, I think it differs. So where we've got big centres and large populations of people, where you've got senior leaders who are presenting a great diverse image and encouraging staff to be authentic, to be themselves, then people do come out and do feel empowered and able to be themselves. In branches, say in the centre of rural East Anglia, that may be less the case, and I do think a lot of it is down to role models, and people seeing that actually it's okay.
Who's your role model?
Oh, that's a good
that's
question.
Not on the question list.
Yeah, you know what? And I can't immediately think of one other than for me personally in my journey. I'm actually a fabulous example of somebody who didn't come out till quite late at work, and it was a perception really. It was because I didn't think it was relevant.
Right.
And actually I attended a Spectrum event, and we had a very visibly out trans lady, and I thought, my goodness, if she can do it, you know, how brave, then why can't I?
Yeah.
And so that was really transformational for me, and I've no idea why I didn't do it sooner, really.
But you said it wasn't relevant. I heard you kind of nodding, or I could hear you nodding from the side of my head. But is it? Do you think it is relevant then, bringing your sexuality to work?
I think the workplace should embrace people. Yeah. Work is the one place where you are chosen because you are the best person to perform a function or a job or a service, and therefore you should be recruited on those merits and you should be treated on those merits. So I do sometimes wonder whether we should just all respect each other for our performance and what we achieve, but also how we support each other as well, because I don't see any value in undermining anyone in the workplace in any way. You know, if someone is struggling with their work, support them. If somebody is not behaving how they normally do, question. You don't have to go out and ask them questions, but just say, are you okay? You know, just pop a cup of tea on their desk. What you're doing is you're opening a channel for communication. And, you know, alongside, you know, many of the issues we're talking about today is mental health. And mental health is a huge challenge in the workplace. There are a lot of people who, you know, are battling with themselves, with how they want to present themselves in the business. This is a huge stress, and it shouldn't be.
But do you think that stress has gone up because we live in this social media age? People have to carry their personal brand, therefore they feel they have to bring that into work, and their work defines them in different ways.
I think there's always the fear of being found out.
Right.
I mean, I think sometimes, you know, I come from a media background, and I'm sure there are people there who are out at work, but possibly not at home. And I think it's what we were saying before. It's the cultural, the geographic, and it can be opposite. Your experience was the opposite, but I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I came across recently, a few weeks ago, I went to an event from Equality, I think, and they were presenting a research that they did for the marketing and advertising industry. And it's quite interesting to see. I remember it was something like around 39% of new graduates that are coming into media business are still in the closet, and
into
even though
media businesses,
into media, exactly.
Why is that?
So I think going to a point around not having strong role models that are there to coach this new generation of people is an issue, because when big organizations have, I mean, you don't have to be a senior leader, but if you have someone who is actually there to, and is visible to people, or if you have straight allies that are there to support the LGBT people, I mean, just of the fact of having a rainbow flag next to your computer or being visible with the lanyards, all of these things make people visible and make people recognize that there is someone there who actually cares for them.
But how do you make sure that the lanyard isn't just the lanyard and the rainbow isn't just the rainbow that's splashed on the front? Just say, oh yes, we've got this sticker and we're going to do it. How do you make sure it's actually deep within the organisation?
Because you have to become a member of Spectrum in Barclays to get the lanyard, so we don't hand them out just like sweets. No, it's part of your commitment. And we actually, with our allies, we're very clear in terms of their responsibility in becoming an ally. It's not just to wear the lanyard. It is about making sure that they educate themselves, that, you know, if they see banter which they think is inappropriate, that they do call it out.
And maybe educate, because some banter isn't meant cruelly. It is a lack of education or a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
How do you call it out in a sensitive way, though? Because how do you know that it's banter versus got some serious intent behind it? You know, is there a fear that we're now becoming too PC and then the workplace becomes less fun?
Sorry, I think you have to be sensible to what you say and how you say it, because going to my point about if you're having a 19-year-old person coming into a business who's having his or her first work experience, and you hear something like this, even if it's not meant to be aggressive, that holds you back. So I don't think people should be making the comments anyway. So I think I've been learning on my personal experience and not just being on LGBT that the words have power, and you have to be really careful when you say it, because words hurt people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that people should be more
and you don't have about. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You can take somebody to one side and you know, even make a bit of a joke when you're saying to them, did you really think about what you were saying? Did you understand the impact of that?
I mean, it'd be good to hear from the audience actually about what they've had happen to them at work and certain episodes as well.
I think we were talking earlier about vocabulary as well and political correctness, and sometimes it's difficult to know what you can say, what you can't say, what the correct ways of of communicating are, and therefore I think no one should be chastised if it's you know, you are allowed to get it wrong if you're prepared to get it right.
Are you allowed to get it wrong? Or are we living in this heightened state of offence where if you get it wrong, that's it, you're struck?
Well, I think fear is the worst thing that anyone can have, and you know, quite often understanding breeds fear, and it's much better if somebody can say, oh, I heard about the event you went to at the weekend. You know, can you tell me more about it? And you know, because you would, if someone said they went to a festival, you might say, oh,
right,
you know, tell me more. That was really interesting. And so I think by having open communication in the workplace and having an environment where you're not actually in from 9 till 5 hammered to your desk tapping away, but actually a culture where we encourage people to actually get to know who sits next to them, get to know who sits opposite, and realise that we're all human, but we're all very different. And when we're outside of work, we've all got our
but that weekend, that how was your weekend chat is always a bit difficult. I've always found it very difficult.
That a bit awkward, especially for people who are not in the closet. That are in the closet, sorry.
People that are in the closet, okay.
Yeah, because if you have your partner, or
your lover.
Exactly, or your lover, or whatever. So even if you are, it's always that question, like, what did you do in the weekend? And you would be like, maybe you are not, I'm gonna class. I don't like putting labels, but if you are very calm and you are pretending to be straight, people would be like, his boyfriend or his girlfriend. So it's how you can make sure that you can be openly enough to express yourself and talk with people about you. I personally think that people should be embracing their own selves, because at the end of the day, it's only you who cares about you. Yeah. You shouldn't be really thinking about what your neighbor thinks. Just you live your life. Life is just one. It's just too short, and make sure that you live it to the most.
And the majority of people nowadays are so, particularly in the UK, you know, are so accepting. Yeah. And I think that was the thing for me when I did finally come out at work. I've had nothing other than total and utter support, acceptance, and probably more support and understanding than I had before.
There, though, because in the research that we've launched today, we found that people care more about animals than they do LGBT tolerance. That's the headline. Because we asked people to say...
We are a society of animal lovers.
Society of animal, also more about and less about racism. So we said we did 2 polls. We ran one on the YouGov omnibus, and then we ran one to 2,000 LGBT people. And we said, what 3 things do you care about? The NHS came up number 1 for both communities. Right. But then when we said, and we talked about gender tolerance for people of different sexualities and gender identities, and also gender equality, they were the lowest. things that people in the omnibus cared about, cisgendered heterosexual people, and they were almost the highest for the LGBT community, and actually care for animal rights was higher than that within the straight community. And you start to think, are we all just talking to ourselves a little bit and saying, yes, it's all, just be your true self and it's fine, and that's really easy. But I do wonder, outside of Canary Wharf, the Square Mile, the city, like, is it actually that easy for someone to be out?
Ooh. Again, I think it depends. It depends where you are. I've got family in rural Lincolnshire, and again, I've never experienced any issues. And I think maybe, and again, I'll be provocative, part of the challenge we have is people think it's over. People think it's done and dusted.
Yeah,
so they'll be putting animal welfare first because they see a lot of TV programmes where animals are suffering, and therefore thinking, oh, well, there's still an issue there.
Okay.
But they think LGBT's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we're going to take a little break, and you'll have a look at a short video that we've made as Pride in London that takes all of that research and really brings it to life.
What are you doing?
Dreams you dare to dream really do come true.
Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles smell like lemon drops, way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
We relax.
And the dreams that you dare to dream, well, why can't I?
Welcome back. Hope if you need to go and get a tissue, go and get one now. It was a difficult video. But I mean, it's a really good discussion we're having here, specifically about the workplace, being LGBT in the workplace, and we still have some way to go. So you were picking up on that, and where do we need to go? Like, what does good look like in the workplace? Maybe do you have a view on how do we keep making life better for people at work?
I think we have to keep the conversation going. Actually, I think the point you made, where people think that okay, we've got equal marriage. This is all fine,
Right.
and okay, lovely. Now, anyway, on to profitability. You're never going to have profitability in a workplace where you've got no engagement with your employees, where your workforce are not happy. The number one asset in your business is your people, and therefore you need to make sure that you've got people processes in place that support the work.
And how do you do that? So Tim, who's watching at the moment, he said that great words from you on mental health and the impact within for LGBT people in the workplace, but so many people don't understand that coming out never stops, and that's something that keeps going. You have to keep coming out. So how can we talk more openly about the fact that people have to continue coming out? Maybe that's what good looks like, that you just don't have to come out at work anymore.
So I think, in my industry, there is something that happens in November every year, I think. So it's like a big event where lots of different marketing and advertisers basically set up an event where they welcome new graduates, but it's all about being LGBT in the workplace. So I think having these sort of events basically brings people's confidence up. So when you go to your workplace, you feel more confident because you know, okay, I recognize XYZ companies because they are basically embracing that liberty or of being you. So I think we need more of that across different industries because there are probably more industries where you can definitely see that on balance more than others.
And I think there are particular industries that you would feel are more discriminatory as well.
Name names, which one?
I'm not naming any names, but I'm meaning sort of almost like business types, and I'm quite surprised because I'd have thought media was would be very, very friendly.
That's a common misconception.
Because we come from an industry where, I mean, you can see me, I mean, I'm like very informal, you guys are very corporate, so this is how our business works. So we are very creative, but being creative doesn't mean that everybody's open. There are still things that need to be addressed.
How about banking? Because you traditionally think banking wouldn't be the most open and friendly place to be.
I think the banking industry and most actually of the professions that support banking, legal, consultancy, are actually really advanced in all diversity, not just LGBT, and are really promoting diverse employees because there's a recognition that through diversity you're attracting talent.
How do you pull that all the way through? So Greg, who's watching, has asked, what benefits can organisations offer LGBT people? So what is there different parental leave, for example, for same-sex couples?
Well, the point being that it's equal.
It's
no different. It's no different.
It should be the same.
I think there is an important point about language in some of those policies. So in ensuring that the language of your policies is inclusive, so that people can absolutely see that it means them.
Right.
And I still think a lot of firms have perhaps got some way to go in that regard. But there needs to be a very sort of public recognition that firms are absolutely actively seeking diverse staff members because, to be honest, as well as creating the right colleague environment so that people are as productive as they possibly can be, it's also about recognising, particularly for organisations like banks that are very customer facing, that it's only through having a diverse workforce that you can truly ensure that you're representative of the customers that you're serving. So there absolutely is a very, very powerful business case around diversity.
But do you think that's the case? And we were talking about this about PR and media as well.
So I think based on what I have seen at Dentsu, there is a strong need from us when we're pitching new businesses. So lots of the new business that we have been pitching this year, for example, these brands, one of the requirements is like you have to prove me that your brand or your brands are driving diversity. And it's not just about talking about gender, it's talking about race, talking about background. So you definitely need to have a better and bigger outcome of people from different backgrounds to drive your business and drive that creativity forward, because you don't represent a consumer from Latin America, you don't represent a British white person or a Caribbean black person, you represent the world. So you have to have that workforce working towards just one single goal, which is diversity as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes into the whole talent acquisition process. You've got to make sure that the way you're writing your ads, I mean, the BBC recently had an article on some ads are written in such a way that they sort of exclude women. They're not written with that intention, but the language that is used in them. But I think also as well you have to look at, exactly to your point, that we're all selling products, services, solutions to the population at large, and therefore our organisations, however small, should represent the wider community.
Can you do that? Because if we come out of the LGBT world, and I'll take us out of there just for a second, and we talk about education and access to education and the routes that people take in, they aren't equal.
No.
So how are we ever going to push that forward?
They are not equal, and I mean, another thing I'm very against is the requirement to have a degree in order to get a job. Okay, there are a lot of things that we just have to accept as the base level, the same as when we had the gender pay revelations earlier this year. Okay, let's accept these. and move forward from them? How do we make them better? Well, within your workforce data, so your payroll, your HR processes, you have incredible business intelligence, people intelligence about the people in your organisation. Now, you could have somebody who came in with a first-class degree and they're on this fast-track career, but their performance is low. They're low morale. They're not a team player. And then you've got someone who's come on and they're coming at a very entry-level role, but you can see that they're accessing all these different online learning portals.
Yeah.
Well, look at them. They seem to be ambitious. They're looking at management training courses.
So it's what you were saying before about making sure there's an equal mix and people are respectful of different backgrounds, different sexualities, just differences.
But be prepared to ask the questions as well, to ask, why are you looking at those training courses? Are you interested in going this way? And by doing this, you're addressing perhaps the barriers in education, because there's huge divides.
So I'm going to just dwell on this thing of asking questions, right? Because that's quite important. And if you're a straight ally, like Kieran, who's written in, he said, I'm a straight ally and I try to support my gay colleagues, but it's often hard to get proactive senior allies. So how can he do that, or what could he do at work to change that?
I think the best thing is approaching the LGBT network and take that as an opportunity to start developing.
What if you don't have one?
Yeah.
Well, create one. I think that just to a point, and you don't need to have, imagine for a second that you work in a company made up of 10 people. Let's say there is no an LGBT person. There's no an excuse for you to say, I'm not going to create an LGBT community.
The LGBT network,
No, I'm just giving an example, right? So just the base point is like there is always have to be an LGBT people regardless of having LGBT plus people in your workforce or not, because there has to be a community work that has to be done, and that educational piece to be able to impact society has to also come from the organizations. So for me, that part is really important. Going to a point about Destroy Allied, I think if you don't have an LGBT network, try to find places like Stonewall. Try to go to network events. There is a lot of events going on in London 24/7, where you can go, you can have education, you can meet people with different issues, different challenges, and you can learn from these people.
Stonewall has a lot of regional events. They have a lot of vertical events where they go in there, and it's about educating, listening as well, understanding the challenges. So perhaps you can have events where senior leadership teams do go and they say, look, we're very aware. We like to believe that we operate a very diverse workplace, but we have no specific policies. Can you help us? Can you guide us? And I don't think there's anything wrong in asking for support and guidance, and.
So I think that's probably what Kieran can do. I'll ask for support, and if he's not finding it within the organisation, then perhaps look outside to other resources.
But colleague communities are an extremely powerful, force of good. One in creating communities so like-minded colleagues can see other role models and peers. But also in agitating within the firm and having those conversations at a senior level. So as we were saying earlier, a lot of senior managers, in the same way as society, will assume it's all done and dusted, and actually they don't need to worry about this. There are other diversity groups that they need to be more concerned about promoting. And it is important to get in front of those allies and explain to them actually it isn't done. And some of them are quite surprised, but then they quickly get on board.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this question from Michael, and I'm going to put it out. I'm not sure who's going to take this one. So Michael asks, where does the role of trade unions come into all of this? So who are they're on the front line of fighting LGBT discrimination in the workplace. What's their role, and what's our thoughts on trade unions? It's a tough one because quite difficult to comment for me because I'm not personally a member of a trade union, but we do absolutely have trade union influence, and I think it's a similar role to the employee networks. In that it's yet another voice within within the framework of the firm that is
is putting a voice forward about the importance of diversity and inclusion and workers' rights.
Yeah, I mean, this time last year, the TUC actually published the results of a survey, and 36% of LGBT colleagues in the workplace are still being, they feel they're being bullied. This is not acceptable.
Agreed.
That's a third. It's not acceptable that anyone is being bullied in the workplace. And I think it's good that the trade unions are lifting this up as an issue, because it's, when you're running a business, sometimes your eye comes off the ball and you don't realise that this is happening in your workplace. And by having the trade unions raising this up, we're
it's kind of a pressure group.
It is. And of course, the government, having those conversations with the regulators, with the policymakers.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious of time, and also a couple of other questions that Sam has asked. Well, it's hard for people to feel visible in the education workplace, so for teachers or for lecturers. So due to anxieties around perceptions and parents. So again, what can we do there in those sorts of workplaces? And is it now down to kids who are seeing LGBT culture more through the internet and social media that they're now looking at their school and thinking, well, this doesn't quite match up what's going on in the world?
Yeah, and there's a lot of content actually that teachers can draw against, and there's some fabulous charities out there like Diversity Role Models, Ditch the Label, who are doing extraordinary work with schools and helping schools that perhaps have got problems with bullying, understand the issues, understand the dangers of stereotyping and banter.
Because you don't mind me saying, you have kids, right?
Yeah.
So if you found out that a teacher at your child's school was facing difficulties,
yes,
would you say something, and would you make that known?
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, in the first instance, I'd go to the head of the school, but take it to the governors,
right?
If necessary,
because
that absolutely shouldn't be the case, and I think, the importance of teachers being able to draw upon content that is available should create a more diverse and inclusive environment for them, as well as obviously for the pupils that are within that school.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of people's journeys begin at school. That's when you start to realise your sexuality. You're reaching puberty, and lots of children are going to have lots of questions about themselves, because they're reaching very unfamiliar. They've come from a child and they don't know what they're thinking, and therefore the school has to be a safe environment, and I believe the workplace also has to be a safe environment.
Definitely.
These are places where you go, and when I think a lot of people go to work and they leave a lot behind.
Well, I think it's you say that. I think that generationally that's going to change, because the rise of social and the way people are working is changing quite a lot. As you said, there's more flexibility, and I think what I wanted to come back to is something that you said, Emmy, was around an LGBT network is so important. How do you go about setting one up? And I'm going to look at you as well. How have you done that, and what are the steps that you take to create an effective network?
So it's actually quite interesting, because I met a guy from The Guardian, and they are about to launch the new network. So it was kind of an introductory meeting for me to tell him some tips. So I think the first thing is just to look at internally your business. So look at the potential of the network, regardless of let's be honest, you always will gonna find a percentage of LGBT people in organizations. I don't think there is a business in Britain that doesn't have an LGBT person. There is always going to be one representation of our community. So look inside your business, look what the potential is. Also, try to get involved senior members. I think it's really key. If you want to have a voice, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to have an executive sponsor for that person to have a voice up there in the organization to basically try to get things done for the network. Stonewall is very important. They have lots of documents, lots of things, lots of PDFs for lots of different topics that you can download for free. And they also give access to courses. There are also charities like Role Models. So I think out there is a lot of things that people can look into if they want to set up their LGBT network. I mean, there is intercoms for my community. There might be interlaw, intermedicine,
Right,
engineering.
intergroups,
So just
yeah.
find your inter XXX and then go and find help from them.
Would you add anything to that on what you've
Well,
learned at Spectrum?
So I absolutely agree, and we've touched upon it already about the importance of allies, and I think and that ally again crosses all diversities. So the He for She campaign, where men are encouraged to promote and support women within the firm, is another good example. But allies are absolutely vital in an LGBT network flourishing.
And how have you found the experience of finding allies? Is it that they come to you, or do you kind of...
It can be both.
Okay.
It can be both. So yes, some will absolutely come to the network and ask how they can engage and get more involved. Others, it's just through speaking to them and very quickly, it's, in my personal experience, people don't need much persuading, quite honestly.
No, really.
They quickly get it.
And a slight step back into the education as well. I mean, we've got 2 girls' high schools near to where I live, and they both have very active LGBT organisation clubs, after school clubs.
Okay.
So if we're having these in schools,
right.
we have to have them in the workplace, because how can you transition? It's a bit like not having technology in a workplace. These children have grown up. This is what they're used to. You have to backwards educate them in order for them to be a member of your workforce.
Right.
And there's a girl who's transitioning to a boy at the local school as well. And for the children, yes, there might have been a few questions, but they're really not.
They're not bothered.
Not bothered, and I must say I was quite surprised in a way. I thought, and I actually thought a lot more parents would be
Bothered.
Yeah. From what I don't know. I mean, I'm sure all sorts goes on behind closed doors, but I think this is a very good example of we are not there yet, but we're certainly
There's a change with that generation.
There is a change, and I also think that the new generation is not. Whereas I think sometimes parents, their word went. I think millennials, Generation Z, so they're more prepared to actually question their parents and put them right.
It's exactly that. I think we've just aired our advert during Hollyoaks.
Yeah.
And before it would be, I remember back in the day, you'd watch the TV and you'd watch it, and then you'd maybe talk to a friend about it a day later, or you'd forget about it. But now you're on Twitter talking to other people, finding like-minded people, building networks in different ways. So I think this has been a fascinating discussion around what it means to be LGBT workplace, and I think just a bit generally in life. I've quite enjoyed it. But are there any final thoughts or anything you would want to say to someone who might be struggling in the workplace, who isn't out? Or you mentioned there's quite a lot of people who come to you and say they're not out. Is there anything you would try to help them with, or some words of encouragement?
I think my message for everybody is, regardless of what you are, be nice to people. Don't be horrible to people. We all need love, and I think the world in general need love. So we should try to be as supportive as possible with people. So if there is someone who is in need or comes to us seeking help, let's try to give that person some time to find out what's going on with them. I think that's key, because I wish I had back in my time, and I overcame that issue myself. And I think, especially for the new generation, where we believe that they are more open, these guys still need a lot of support from the adults. So we should definitely be more supportive with everybody.
Yeah, and specifically to the point, I think if there is somebody who is struggling, maybe they can't speak to their friends, they can't speak to their family about it for whatever reason, or don't feel they can, find their LGBT employee network if there is one, and because they will just find so much support, and it will open doors for them, and if that resource isn't available, because I appreciate not all firms have that, small firms by way of example may not, then find a local charity, or seek out somebody like Ditch the Label, who've got such,
or
come and volunteer.
I mean, even come along. I mean, this is completely blowing the subject now, but you know, the Alzheimer's show was set up because it was a subject that wasn't allowed to be talked about.
Right.
And you know, it had to be hidden, and you couldn't say that you had it in your family. Well, the show was set up to be a safe place for people to go and to talk about
that. So again,
and their issues and their
yeah.
challenges and what they find hard about it. And that's what Pride in London's about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, talk to the person next to you. You'll find out they've been through exactly the same
Yeah, they
as
will.
you.
Right, well, on that note, that's been the 5th episode of Facebook Live. We'll be back again next week for yet another episode of Facebook Live. Thanks for tuning in.